Hello, my lovely library lions. Today I'm going to talk to you about all the books I read in August. Now that we're heading into fall, I did complete my summer TBR, which was a little harder than I thought it was going to be because a lot of the books were very slow, but I got through it. I read a couple more books that weren't on my TBR, and we are headed into fall, so let's wrap up the summer. My first read of the month was a buddy read with Pages with Paige, so I'll link her channel down below, and it was The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. This is a coming-of-age story about a gay girl in sort of middle America who ends up getting sent to a conversion camp at some point in the story. So it covers most of her life, which I thought was really interesting. We get to see a lot of pieces of her life starting from when she's quite young and her first sort of gay experience where she realizes that she might like girls, to her journey into high school. She has a couple of girls that she falls for and has romantic attachments with, and then eventually gets sent off to the camp and meets some people there, and we follow her story through all those years. So the pacing is a little weird, but I thought it kept up very well for trying to cover so much of her life in just this size of a book. There were a lot of quotes in here that were very, very good as far as sort of hitting the feeling of what it feels like to grow up like that, or to have a discovery about yourself like that, and I really, really liked it. I enjoyed a lot of the parts of it. The conversion camp had some absolutely harrowing scenes that were horrific. The one thing I didn't like is how the sort of two leaders of the conversion camp are portrayed. We have a very shrill, harpy-like woman who is unbelievably evil at every moment, and then a man who is seen as, for some reason, sympathetic. He's the head of a conversion camp. He is sort of founded it, but he was gay once too and had a misstep, and now he's maybe like doing this out of guilt that he is gay and he's trying to hide it. So he's seen as very sympathetic, but at the same time, everything that's happening to these kids is his fault, and I don't want to sympathize with him regardless of how he came to be here. Kids are being horribly abused, and he's the one who's facilitating it, but for some reason we get to see him in a very gracious light. Overall, there was just so much going on in this book. Some of the plots don't really go anywhere. They mention some things and you just never get a resolution. In fact, largely there is no resolution to this book, which in a way is beautiful. You don't see how things end, and that's sort of how life is. This is a story about Cameron's life, and you start at one point and you end at one point, and you don't see sort of her future and how things might work out for her. But I wanted some of the threads to tie up. I wanted some conclusions, and I didn't feel like I got any conclusions from it. It was still a really amazing story, and I would recommend this. There aren't a lot of lesbian coming-of-age stories. There aren't a lot of bisexual girl coming-of-age stories. There's so much media focused on men and their experiences, so this book is valuable just for that. And I would recommend it to people still who are looking for that sort of story. It is brilliant what it does, even if it's not my favorite book of the month. The Owl Crate book I read this month is actually the one that took me the longest to finish. So it's The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. I wanted to love this so bad. The cover is stunning. It's a beautiful cover. It's about sisters. I love books about sibling relationships. And honestly, just the whole first 200 pages of this book drag so badly. I was bored. I kept putting it down and I didn't want to pick it up again. I kept thinking, oh, I have to get through this book, I have to finish it so I can move on to something I actually want to read, but I just wasn't motivated. There is a twist, and when the twist happened, I was suddenly really invested in the book again for about 50 more pages, and then the pacing starts to drop again and slow down again. The issue is really just with the pacing, and that's a shame. The world is interesting, the characters have enough differences between them to be interesting. The romances I could have done without. I didn't feel like the romances added anything to the story. They just kind of made the plot drag out, and it was already dragging out so much. The problem with the world, though, is while the world is interesting, the building of it is done so poorly. For the first 50 pages, I have no idea what some of the words the characters are saying mean, what the world is supposed to be like. I'm so confused for most of it, and I'm sitting there thinking, am I dumb? Or did they not explain this? Is this just supposed to be something I find out later, but they're talking about it a lot right now? And it's just a mess. I feel like there should have been more building in the first half of the book instead of building everything sort of in the middle, because the first half of the book is unbearable. It's so boring, and I think part of the reason the pacing and felt so bad and that it felt so boring was because of how weirdly the world was built, and that I didn't understand what was going on for a large portion of that. So I'm glad to be done it. I didn't enjoy this book, unfortunately. I'm going to keep it for now because it looks very pretty on my shelf, but I can see this being an on-haul candidate in the future, even if it is signed. After finishing that, I sort of rewarded myself with The Secret Loves of Geeks, and this is curated by Hope Nicholson. So it is a anthology series with comics, prose, all sorts of different stories inside of it. You can have some prose and photos, and honestly, there are stories in here that hit really, really hard, and I really resonated with, and I adored, and I wanted to think about after reading, and I wanted to keep. And then there are stories in here that I didn't enjoy at all, that I felt were pointless additions, that didn't suit the theme of the anthology, that seemed to just get in here because the author was a big name, or just were confusing and didn't seem to have anything to do with anything. There are some stories that don't seem to feature either love or being a geek, and some stories that just feature love and an author who is a geek, but geekdom doesn't really feature into the story, so it feels weird and like it doesn't quite belong in this space. But for the ones that are good, they are so, so good that I still really enjoyed this anthology. There are great comics, great prose stories, and I really, really loved it. I love when Hope Nicholson does these sort of anthologies that focus on fandom and how being a fan changes your life, how being a geek can affect your life. And this one is largely about how being a geek can affect your relationships and your love life, and how you love other geeks, or how your geekdom can prevent you from finding things like that. And it's really beautiful. I liked a lot of the stories. I really resonated with it, but I wish there had been a little bit more of a careful curation as to what defines a geek love story, and not just, here are some stories that involve geek stuff, here are some stories that are from authors who like geek stuff and are in love or have a love story, and here are some comics that have nothing to do with anything. So overall, I liked it, because the strong points were really, really strong, but could have been better. Could have been better. Next, I read All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman. So this was an arc that I got from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review, and I was on the fence about whether or not I was going to adore this book. It's marketed in the way where it's like, oh, it's a Hunger Games. Do you want to read something that's similar to the Hunger Games? Pick this up. And I hate that, because no book ever really lives up to that comparison where it's like Harry Potter. Did you like Harry Potter? Read this one. It's like Hunger Games. If you liked Hunger Games, read this. Twilight, all the biggest books get thrown into this pile of what book are we going to say this is like, so that people who liked this huge book might pick up our book. And it's kind of setting unrealistic expectations, but I actually adored this maybe more than the Hunger Games. It has some similar vibes. Obviously, it's about a bunch of children fighting to the death in an event that the whole world knows about at this point. They didn't always know about it, but because of a tell-all book, the world now all knows about it. So I really liked that device, that a book has been released and we get a little paragraph from the book at the beginning of every chapter that explains sort of what the Blood Veil is, how long it's been happening, the history of it, and sort of this tell-all book has been released and the whole world now knows that these 7 families are killing one of their children every 7 years to try and get access to this magic. The magic system is beautiful. It's a weird blend where they have jewelry that they fill with spells, and you can buy spells. There are like brand name spells, there are no-name brand spells, so depending on how wealthy you are, or how good of a relationship you have with curse makers and spell makers, you might have better spells than other competitors. And we get 4 main characters, so with multi-POV books, I'm always nervous that it's going to feel like the multi-POVs didn't need to be there, because often we have POVs that are showing the same events, or POVs that have characters whose views are too similar, whose voices aren't unique enough, and that was not an issue here, luckily. I loved all 4 of the main characters. I was totally smitten with Alistair. I think he is so cute. I love this sort of villain monster persona, but he's actually an ubu soft boy inside. That's the kind of character that I'm always here for. I actually ended up really liking Gavin and seeing his journey from where he starts to where he ends the book, because he feels like an entirely different character. Isabel and Brioni. I forget these two I confused a little bit. They didn't feel as distinct as Gavin and Alistair did, but I still really liked their sort of friendship, that they were no longer friends, that they both had this journey. And I like that it was light on the romance. There were some romantic tensions between several of the competitors, but none of that was taking the place of the main story, where these kids are being forced to kill each other, and some of them want to break the curse, some of them want to win. And there were just so many good twists. There were twists that I didn't see coming at all, and I probably should have, but I was taken aback by them, and I was so pleased to see where this story was going. I really, really loved it. I'm going to read the sequel. I didn't think I was going to go into this book and sort of fall in love and find a new series that I'm really, really obsessed with and into, and I want to be part of the fandom. So I'm lucky that NetGalley let me read that, and I read it a lot sooner than I probably would have if I hadn't gotten a copy from NetGalley and felt like I had to finish it before the book was published. So when it comes out in November, everyone should pick it up if they can, if you were into the Hunger Games. And I hate myself for saying this, but it's sort of an older skewed Hunger Games. It's a little more graphic, it's a little darker, but it's got the same vibes, and it is there. The last book I read this month was a manga, and it was My Hero Academia Vigilantes Volume 4. So I'm really enjoying this series again. I dropped it at Volume 2, and when I picked it up at Volume 3, I realized it is actually a series I like. It's a little darker than the mainline My Hero. The characters are all adults. We get to see more of hero society versus just sort of the rose-tinted view that pro-heroes and pro-hero students have of it. Here we have a view from the point of people whose quirks are not good enough to be heroes but still want to do good and maybe don't fit into society because of that. There were some very gruesome scenes in this volume of it, and I really, really enjoyed that. I'm liking the more mature spin on things. I'm liking seeing the characters from My Hero make appearances here, and I really want to read more of this. I already own Volume 5, and I will probably keep buying them until I catch up to where the manga is now. I have heard it's ending soon. I don't know if that's true. Will be a little sad if it is, because I know My Hero is also ending soon, so I won't have anything to fill that gap, which I was hoping this would do for me. But I really liked it, and I think I'm going to enjoy going into Volume 5 when I do that. And that is it for this month. I only read 5 books. Not too bad. I was pretty distracted this month. I got back into some other fandoms, which I've been saying a lot recently. I've been getting into more games. I got really into Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss again, so I've been spending more time watching things and, you know, going on Tumblr and scrolling through tags than I usually would like to, but I've been having fun, and that's what matters. Sometimes my reading is not always going to be where I would usually like it to be, and that's okay. I have learned to let myself enjoy my other hobbies as well. Let me know how many books you read this month down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a good weekend!